Hey people, Zannerman here. What is the going rate for hallucinogens these days? I only ask because I have a new dealer. Anyway, this time I'm talking about Midnight Sun. It's a mod for Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, made by the user Kittytail on the Nexus. The mod was first uploaded on the 1st of November 2025. I played version 1.4, uploaded on the 5th of November 2025. The mod is about a journey into an accursed place called the Boreal Valley, and your travels alongside the alchemist Stella, and the morality of deeds done for the greater good as an overarching theme. The mod features a quest, a follower you travel with for the duration of the quest, a new region with several locations and dungeons, and a varied set of biomes. It also has new loot, abilities, enemies, and spells. Some good voice acting and custom music for the new region. It's a well-presented package, packed into a fairly small region, with a playtime of under 10 hours. Now, Kittytail is one of those mod authors that I have been following for a while, and I'm always happy to see a new mod from them, as most of their mods are thematic spell packs with custom particle effects and visuals, and I have most of them in my current mod list. So seeing a new quest mod released from them got me excited to try it out. They have released a quest mod previously as well called the Grand Paladin, but I have yet to play through it, even though I have had it installed for multiple playthroughs now. Given Kittytail's track record of making magic and VFX mods, one thing I expected from this mod are custom spells and abilities, and I wasn't disappointed. Sure, the abilities you as a player gain access to are limited, to some extent, but the enemies make use of Kittytail spells, such as the ones from the ancient death magic mod, and I found them fun to fight against. The mod takes strong inspiration from FromSoft games in its visuals, and the name of the Boreal Valley seems like a direct reference to Dark Souls 3. There might also be some inspirations from Elder Scrolls Online and Castlevania. The mod is recommended for characters of level 15 and above, but I would leave it as a late game mod. I'll go more in depth on why later, but you'll find higher level gear, and you'll face some high level enemies and bosses. I played through it as level 25, and some fights I won through sheer luck, cheese, or sometimes potion spam. So expect some tough fights. Before I dive into the mod and its story, would I recommend you play through it yourself? Yes. The spectacle, atmosphere, good level design, fun fights, and cool custom items and models make it well worth playing, in my opinion. Those are seriously some of the best in mods. The big downside is that the narrative is sparse, and it failed to hook me properly. I'll go over more of my thoughts on the narrative, but to do that will require spoiling parts of the story, so from this point onwards there will be spoilers. Let's dive into the mod. The quest begins in the town of Morthal, at the Moorside Inn. On the counter, I find the book, The Other Side, Volume 1. The book tells the story of a person who had heard tales of a place called the Boreal Valley. Creatures with pale blue eyes come out of the valley and destroy their family home, and their father disappears. There is a path through the mountains to get to the Boreal Valley, but it isn't mentioned where this path lies. Now the starting motivation to get to the valley is a bit weak. I don't get a reason for going there from just reading the book. It doesn't really tell me anything about the place, except that it lies beyond the mountains and is a place of evil. Not even where the entrance is. But the quest marker points you to where to go, so I guess I'll go. I find motivation to be one of the weaker points of the mod, both for the player and the NPCs we'll encounter later. By this point, I don't know enough about the Boreal Valley to know why I should go there. Do I follow in the footsteps of the author of this book? Well, I can, but it doesn't really pay off to get invested in that. It's also unclear when this book was written. Could be decades old by the time we find it. Nor is finding the author expressed as a goal when you encounter Stella, which is a character you'll encounter as you enter the Boreal Trail. Stella is an alchemist, who tags along as a companion when you travel into the Boreal Valley. although you learn of her existence before you encounter her, through a note on an alchemy table outside the Boreal Trail. Once inside the trail, you encounter her pretty quickly at her camp. She says that she is traveling to the Boreal Valley for a reagent, as she is making a concoction to help evoke positive memories and dreams, then gives you some potions and joins our party. The trail itself is fairly linear, but it has a branching path to get some additional treasure and fights. The enemies you encounter are mostly undead and some Daedrats. I do like the environmental storytelling of discovering dead animals before you come across the undead, so you know that there's something evil happening in this place. There are also lit braziers that show you the correct path to advance. Using light as a guidance tool for leading the player where to go is almost standard practice in level design these days. But hey, it works. The mod features some new models for urns, barrels, and chests that you can loot. Something about the chest having 3 locks that open in unison and close shut just right is something I found super satisfying. Like those oddly satisfying videos that you find online. Locked versions of the chest even come with a cool detail. If a chest is locked, it will have a magical blue lock on it. Just a neat detail. Stella has some scripted moments where she speaks a couple of lines, but for the most part she was silent while traveling. You can ask her for her thoughts, but sometimes the response you'll get is a random shower thought, rather than anything relating to what you're doing. She also has some responses that build on her character. If she takes too much damage in combat, she will teleport away and return once combat is finished, which I thought was a nice element. I don't know if there's any story relevance to that, because I feel like you don't learn enough about Stella over the course of the mod and what her whole deal is, so it just ends up being a thing that she does. She does make a pun at the plank bridge.
I hope the bridge doesn't play a plank on us. Prank. Sorry.
Which got a smile from me, dog. But I like wordplay. You might groan and uninstall the mod in rage. Once we enter the Boreal Valley itself, we encounter a dark fog that settles over the valley. It makes it moody and atmospheric. The trail and the valley also features some creepy music. In the valley you don't have any braziers to guide you along, but there is something equally as good. In the distance you can see the peaks of a Gothic castle against the skyline. It's a neat way to orient yourself as you explore, as you have the castle as a landmark visible from almost anywhere in the valley, always looming ominously on the horizon, and serves as a goal of where to go. One of the first locations you'll come across is the graveyard, filled with the walking dead that appear out of the ground, and the forgotten catacombs beneath it. This is a side dungeon, linking into an overarching story that takes place in 3 side dungeons around the valley. It's a nice dungeon that has you fight through hordes of undead, and some spiders. It uses a custom interior tile set which makes it immediately different from Skyrim's existing dungeons. It's not a very long dungeon, taking place in a single cell. But I don't say that as a negative thing. I do enjoy my sprawling and long dungeon crawls from time to time, but they can overstay their welcome. The dungeons in this mod are more bite-sized in that regard, and don't take too long to complete. The Forgotten Catacomb is built in the standard Skyrim dungeon donut design, where there is a locked door that can only be opened from one side, and it loops back to the entrance at the end. The end, in this case, is a large room filled with enemies. There's a shrine that you can purify, and the boss of the dungeon, named Caranthir, appears. The boss is fairly tough and can teleport around the room, amongst other yonders. When he's defeated, he drops an item called the Sovereign of the Graves, which is a powerful buff that increases health, magicka, and stamina while inside the valley. A nice reward to help you in some of the fights to come, as the enemies are quite powerful. It can help you regulate the difficulty of your experience, while not overpowering you outside the valley. If you're entering the valley at lower levels, you can still have a chance against some of the later bosses. We also learn that there are 3 others like Caranthir that came to the valley, 4 members of the Solemn Monastery, a knightly order from High Rock that serve the interest of the nobility. They seemingly wield forbidden arts like Daedra summoning and necromancy, as Stella tells it. We'll find the other 3 members of this party in 2 other dungeons, where we have to cleanse more shrines. It's a nice overarching side story to tie a few of the other locations together, and you get more context with each one you explore. The next area I explored was a creepy forest section. And of course I decided not to follow the road and head straight into the forest. The forest itself is very atmospheric, both at nighttime and daytime. The forest is shrouded in mists and thorn bushes block your sightlines. It's also filled with swarms of zombie flies, which are fast-moving, health-draining flying swarms that are perhaps best dealt with at range, as they surround you quickly and drain your health equally as quickly, and can't feasibly be outrun. I stumble across a place called the Moonlit Watchtower, and inside I find a dead vampire, with a note saying that the valley belongs to someone else now. A conflict, perhaps? Further into the forest I encounter a werewolf. Perhaps there's an ongoing war between Edwards and Jacobs. I am, of course, wrong in this assumption. Much of the mod's writing is quite understated. You have to make your own conclusions based on what you find, reading the scattered bones and making the connections. And after more exploration, I think the intent is for the threat to have been sent by the necromancers who occupy the keep, rather than any werewolf faction. Following the actual road through the forest, you come upon a cattle house, a place where the vampires who once ruled the valley kept their cattle, their victims. A gruesome place, and also where The Other Side Volume 2 is found, where you learn of the fate that befell the person who wrote the book. They were captured by the people of the valley and taken to the cattle house. The book ends with them deciding to fight their captors to escape, or die trying. I think this is where that particular plotline ends. The question I was left with is this the current rulers of the valley that are responsible? Or were these captors the vampires? How long ago was this? A necromancer's note here indicates that the necromancers kept doing what the vampires did, and drew people to the valley to soul gem them for their master. So I guess the obvious interpretation is that the necromancers were the ones responsible. It does mention pale blue eyes like the eyes of Stella, or another NPC you meet later, but we can only infer a connection between them, and I don't actually know the answer. The writing is vague, in a way that was detrimental to my enjoyment. I'll come back to this after we meet some NPCs, but as far as I can tell, the author of The Other Side didn't manage to beat their captors, and it would have been nice to get a definitive conclusion to it, one way or another. Maybe I just didn't find it if there was an ending. But there is no Other Side Volume 3 in the files either. Aside from the castle, there are 2 more distinct areas of the valley. A snowfield with spectral trees, a fairly open area with some ghostly enemies and a wisp mother. There's also a bioluminescent mushroom forest, filled with various charas. I find both areas really nail it in the visual department. Each area feels very distinct from each other, and visually beautiful and coherent in their own way. Although I admit, using Ulvenwald plus nature of the wildlands for my trees does help a lot for the visuals, and Freak's floral fields for grass. The mushroom forest has a charas nest that you can explore, that has a trap of sorts at the entrance that I found really cool. The behemoth lurking inside the nest will attack if you come close, and then retreat inside again. It's more of an environmental hazard than an enemy you fight, but once triggered, it leaves the opening free for you to follow it inside. I think it was well executed, and a bit freaky to suddenly have it lunge out of the hole in the ground. There is a graveyard in front of the castle, with another side dungeon hidden away in a tomb, called the Bloodline's Catacombs, and a short story to go along with it that links it into the solemn monastery story. A Breton knight called Songbird came to the valley to find her missing sister, Marith, and found her in the depths of this dungeon, but couldn't bring herself to kill her sister, so she left her sword behind for someone else to deal with her sister. We delve into the Bloodline's Catacombs and discover that a vampire civil war took place here. We find the desecrated shrine and dispel it, and Marith appears. I slay the Wraith Knight and finish the job that Songbird couldn't. The final two members of the Solemn Monastery are found in a dungeon in the spectral snowfields called the Cradle of Bone.
I find more cheer in a graveyard.
In an old note, we find out that the valley was once the place of a great battle between the Yokudans and the Falmer, and there is something evil sleeping in the depths of this valley, gradually sapping away at the humanity of those that dwell in the valley through whispers. The cave is filled with bones and the walking dead, and the blast bones. At a shrine in the bottom of the cave, I summon the final two members of the Solemn Monastery, Esmord and Losfane. They seem to be guarding something, as they drop the key to an inner sanctum. What could be down here? The hardest boss in the mod as far as I'm concerned. It's a Daedra, known only as Ibelhag, clad in full Daedric armor. And the fight was brutal. The narrative implications is that this is the evil that has been resurrecting the dead and collecting their souls. The Solemn Monastery was sent to the valley to purge it of evil, but they seem to believe that they were betrayed by the very nobles that they were employed by, because it was an impossible task, and they were corrupted by the valley and turned into Wraith Knights, as they succumbed to the whispers of Ibelhag. I think it's a nice narrative to uncover gradually as you explore, although somewhat dependent on which dungeons you tackle first. If you tackle the Cradle of Bones first, then you've already got the conclusion and the why. I think the ideal order is the one I presented them in this video. I actually did the Bloodlines catacombs last out of the three when I played the mod. It is a complete narrative, although somewhat disjointed in its telling, and it takes some effort to piece together, but it's pretty good as a side story. Now the final area to cover is the castle. Evermist Keep is occupied by the Evermist Necromancers. The naming convention and the way that they're dressed reminds me of ESO, which I'm not saying is a good or bad thing, just the presentation. It's similar to how most of the 100 cults in ESO are presented. The castle entrance is guarded quite heavily by watchful eyes, although there are alternate paths to approach the castle, which is always a plus. You can skip the main gate by going through the woods, and bypass the courtyard entirely by going through the mushroom forest and entering the castle from below. The courtyard is filled with hostile Evermist necromancers, and a herald of despair. Something good guys would keep as pets, right?
Are we the baddies?
Like I mentioned before, the necromancers use custom spells, which make them more interesting to fight against than your standard Skyrim mage. There is a lever that opens the main gate, and you can proceed into the castle proper. The spectral form of someone named Arcane appears, and I learn from quest objective updates that there are two leaders of the necromancers, one up above and one far, far below in the ruins at the base of Blight Town, and I should go find them. Arcane's projection tells me that
whatever you seek lies here. I will be waiting.
Problem is, I don't know what I seek. Why am I here? Revenge for the author of the Other Side books? To stop the undead menace? To find Stella's reagent? Or to get more loot? None of those really motivated me to keep going. I suppose my primary motivation was to find out more of what's going on, and to find out more about the Evermist necromancers. And so I slay my way through more Evermist necromancers inside and make my way to the basement, where I find the real Arcane. Now Arcane isn't hostile towards us, and instead wishes to speak. I can learn a bit more about this person. You can ally with her for a quest, or attack her, although she does come with a pet Chaurus behemoth. But before that, let's go speak with the other leader. I fight my way up the keep, through rooms of Evermist necromancers, filled with loot. So much loot. Dang, that's a lot of loot. Loot. Noot noot. The amount of loot you get thrown at you can be quite ridiculous. You get too much of it too easily. Every shelf is lined with potions and high-tier materials, There's even a fully enchanted set of ebony armor lying on a table. Sure, you can only carry so much, but if you're stubborn or have infinite carry weight, it wouldn't surprise me if you could get a good 100,000 septims worth of loot here. Did the potions aid me in actually finishing the mod? Yes, they did. Particularly the celestial potions you find in the castle were paramount to me overcoming some of the fights, and the scrolls let me summon some strong allies to keep aggro off myself in boss fights. But you get overloaded with scrolls, potions, and materials and equipment from just a couple of rooms. And there's at least a couple of potions lying around in every room, and every shelf is stocked with items. It just becomes too much. Reaching the top, there is a place called the Moonlit Garden, where suddenly the necromancers are no longer hostile. After slaughtering my way through dozens of them on my way up, that was a bit jarring. You get to witness a speech made by Sandro, their leader, as he projects himself into the garden to speak with his necromancers. I proceed onwards to the Moonlit Pinnacle, where I come face to face with Sandro himself. Like Arcane, you can ally yourself with Sandro, or attack him and pass your judgment. Arcane and Sandro both give you small quests if you ally yourself with them. Arcane has you loot Chaurus chitons, which you can loot off the Chaurus in the Mushroom Forest. Sandro's quest has you place a wreath of flowers on a grave in the Spectral Snowfields. Both feel inconsequential, essentially fetch quests, but they do serve a purpose. In the Mushroom Forest, on the shoreline, you can find Arcane's old camp, where she kept people in cages, adding to her characterization. Meanwhile, Sandro's quest builds on his character, as he has you visit graves of people that possibly meant something to him. Completing these quests also unlock additional dialogue when you return to the leaders. You learn, for instance, that Sandro is a Yokudan. Yokuda is a continent to the west of Tamriel, and the ancestral homeland to the Redguards, and he wants to establish something called Dawnhold, which is apparently a utopia ruled by his will. And Arcane is a Breton girl from High Rock, who climbed over a fence she shouldn't have and was shamed and punished for what the world hated, and then massacred the provincial capital of the province she grew up in. Her goal is to produce a serum that enhances a mortal's physical and mental prowess, and to distribute it to everyone so that they all have the strength to fight for what they believe. The mod ends quite abruptly here. Once you have met both leaders and spoken to them, maybe done their side quest, the mod just tells you to exit the valley, and that's pretty much it for the story. Unless you initiate story through gameplay by attacking and killing them. Then you get their boss fights. You can tell Sandro that he should pay for his crimes, but honestly I don't know enough about him to know what his crimes are. He also doesn't fight you if you don't initiate the fight yourself. He just lets you walk out. Both Sandro and Arcane have cool boss fights though. They have unique moves. There is also a book you can find that details their movesets, so you can prepare yourself and perhaps figure out some nice counters. Sandro summons a circle of blades around him that shoot out in all directions, and the Bone Boys, who explode when they get near you. Arcane has a pet Chaurus behemoth, and once brought to low health, will transform into a werebear, which turns it into a pretty difficult battle because of the regeneration and her heavy attacks. With both leaders encountered, or dead, all that's left for us is to leave the valley. When you exit the valley through the Boreal Trail and return to Stella's camp, Stella will bid you goodbye. I want to say that she got the reagent she was after, but honestly, I don't really know what she did. She'll teleport away, ending the quest Midnight Sun. I've put off talking about the narrative because I find it hard to talk about the writing in this mod. I can't really place my finger on what it is exactly that I find fault with, why the writing doesn't hit for me, without going too editorial or technical with the language and structure. It uses unclear language that also takes a philosophical bent, a powerful combination that makes the story and text harder to follow, which is why I have resorted to calling parts of it vague, which in and of itself is vague. Ironic. Now, I don't consider myself to be a smart man. There's too much I know that I don't know for me to call myself that. But I don't think my reading comprehension is too bad. but still I had difficulty following the story just by playing. The fact I can coherently talk about the side story of the Solemn Monastery is only because I worked through and analyzed it while making the script for this video, or Arcane and Sandro's backgrounds and stories, because I pored over the text while making this video. I think an overarching issue here is that the setup and stakes are not defined. I mentioned previously that I had trouble with motivation for my character to be invested, because I didn't find the mod presented me with an easy motivation to latch onto, which could be as simple as making me oppose or support the antagonists, by providing further clarity to their prior deeds they are currently making, or explaining what they aim to accomplish in the future, explaining what is at stake in the now and in the future if these people are left to their own devices. Their goals are a bit too high concept to be concrete. What does giving a serum that enhances abilities to absolutely everyone do? What are the ramifications of that? The production of the serum would need to be immense, just to supply the province of Skyrim. What is Dawnhold? A utopia. But what exactly is Sandro doing to create this utopia? What form will this utopia take? It's such a high concept that I failed to visualize it. And will they ever reach their goals of Dawnhold? Probably not. If it is an exploration of fighting for an idealistic dream, I guess I was missing the actual exploration, the debate and the exploration of ramifications, and the possibility of ever achieving something ideal. And for the player to judge if it's worth to do something bad to achieve a goal, you kinda need to understand what the goal is. Pacing wise, the mod felt like it was building up to something when I reached the keep. But then when I encountered the Necromancer leaders, I get to choose to help or oppose them. It was a bit anticlimactic, but I don't know what would make this flow better without adding a ton of extra work. I mentioned that the side quests, if you ally yourself with Sandro or Arcane, feel inconsequential. They feel like they don't really matter for furthering these people's goals, because they don't build on what the Necromancer leaders are planning. I guess you could argue that getting the Chorus Chitons for Arcane does, but she also trains and domesticates them, so getting them herself wouldn't be too far-fetched. I have later learned, through comments by Kittytail, that the Ancient Death Magic mod ties into Midnight Sun. It places some Necromancer enemies in Skyrim, which might give the player the motivation to solve the Necromancer situation, and it could be useful to have it installed if you want to play Midnight Sun for that reason. Not to mention you get access to all the spells that the Necromancers use. Unfortunately, I played Midnight Sun's standalone, without Ancient Death Magic. Conclusion. To summarize Midnight Sun, I think it's a brilliantly presented world, with good world building and level design, featuring a lot of custom assets, and it really nails the visual design and atmosphere it's going for. It has a lot of good fighting, new monsters, enemies and abilities that keep things fresh, and some challenging boss fights to test yourself against, that feel challenging, but fair. But where it falls short is that the narrative is so high concept, it ends up being a barrier to getting invested. It also doesn't take enough time to establish player motivation, and the stakes for success or failure, leading to the central theme of being forced to do evil in the pursuit of an idealistic goal, feeling touched upon, but not explored thoroughly. But if you take the effort to dig deeper, there is a compelling theme here, and a story that's being told. It's well worth a playthrough, in my opinion. It didn't have any crashes or stability issues stemming from Midnight Sun. I did have a couple of issues with mod replaced trees. Some were floating, others were viewed from angles that they weren't meant to be viewed from. I also had an encounter with an invisible troll. I'm not sure if it was intended or just a missing mesh, or some next level trolling. So yeah, go play Midnight Sun. That's all I had to say. Cheers.